Hi everybody, this is Steve Manser and this is part 5 of our tutorial series on rental agreements. This tutorial covers backdating rental agreements. Backdating a rental agreement is something that you should seldom, if ever, have to do, hopefully. But if you do need to do it, Roller will handle some of the heavy lifting work for you. Now, before we actually open up the program and go through backdating a rental agreement, I think going through a few diagrams will actually be very instructive, because otherwise you will probably see a lot of reversals and things will be very difficult to understand. Now let's start with this very simple diagram that I have here, and then we'll work into the more complicated scenarios. First, we have a timeline going across the top, January through December. And in this case, it's showing us that January through April are closed financial periods, and May is the current period. Now, the rental agreement is shown by the green box. It goes from January 13th through December 31st. And the rental assessments are shown in the boxes below. The long purple box represents the recurring definition of the monthly rent, and the blue boxes represent the rent assessment instances. Now you'll note that rent 1 is a standalone instance. It was prorated for the short month of January. And then rent 2, rent 3, rent 4, rent 5 are all instances of the purple rent definition. So let's take a look at what happens if we amend this rental agreement, and let's say that the amendment starts in June. We would terminate RAID 1 or rental agreement 1 at the end of May, and we would start up a second rental agreement in June. And continuing with our convention of rent due on the first of the month, there is no proration involved here. So this one is pretty straightforward. Now let's change it up a bit. Let's assume that we had to make this change on May 13th, that we couldn't let it wait till June 1st. Well, in this case, we'll have to reverse some things, because on the 1st of May, we created rent 5, which is being charged against RAID 1. And so if we have to split between RAID 1 and RAID 2 in May, we're going to need a prorated assessment that applies to RAID 1, and we'll need another prorated assessment that applies to RAID 2. So we reverse rent 5, and we create the two prorated assessments, little r5 and little r6, and that takes care of it. So now let's change up the situation a little bit further. Let's suppose that instead of making the change apply on May 13th, let's suppose we actually had to go back into April, which unfortunately is a closed financial period, but we had to make this change as of April 13th. So that's going to present a few complications because April is closed. Now, one option you have, of course, is to reopen the month of April, in which case the change that we would make here would be very much like the one that we just got through making in May, except you would have two reversed rent payments instead of one. But let's suppose that that's just not an option for you and you must leave April closed. Let's take a look at what would happen. So since rent 4 and rent 5 are both currently being charged to RAID 1, we would have to reverse both of those, because introducing RAID 2 back in April means that some of the rent for April will be charged to RAID 1 and the rest of it will charge to RAID 2, and all of the rent for May will be charged to RAID 2. But since the month of April is closed, we can't create any adjusting entries like the reversal for RAID 4 back in April. So Roller creates that entry at the first available date, which is May 1st. So you'll see a minus rent 4 blue box there representing the adjusting entry for rent 4. Now we also have to create two prorated rent payments for April. Those are labeled little r5 and little r6. R5 being the portion of April rent that gets applied to RAID 1, and R6 being the portion that gets applied to RAID 2. And again, note that we can't create those entries in April because it's closed, so they also stack up right there at May 1st, the first available date. Okay, now next we have rent 5, which was originally all charged against RAID 1, but now the new RAID 2 totally covers May, so the rent for May should actually be charged to RAID 2. So we can see that rent 5 is reversed, And we can see the adjusting entry for Rent 5. It's the blue box with a red minus Rent 5 in it, which is also on May 1st, since that's where you want it to line up and May is open. And then finally, we have Rent 7, which is the rent for the month of May being charged to RAID 2. So this pretty much covers what Roller does to backdate a rental agreement. You can see that the further back you go into closed periods will result in more and more assessments and adjusting entries being created at the first available date in an open period. So now let's do an example in Roller that corresponds to that diagram we just looked at. Here I have a single rental agreement. Let's take a quick look at the payer statement for this person. I'm looking at 2 months worth of data. He's got one rental agreement with one $1,000 rent payment and a $10 pet fee. So for this 2 month period, his assessments total $2,020 and he's sent in payments of $2,020, so his balance is zero. So let's make a backdated amendment to this rental agreement. Let me bring it up here. Edit. Okay, now there's a couple of things I want you to notice here. First, for the sake of context, today is November 6th, so I'm making these changes as of November 6th. And you'll notice that the term start date that I've got here is October 15th. So making this change is backdating a rental agreement. The second thing to notice is this line at the top of the dates form. It says last close is Wednesday, October 31st. So the month of October is closed, and of course all prior months are closed, so it's not going to let me add or change anything in the month of October. So I have already gone through most of the approval flow here. All we have to do is make it active, and let me do that now. Okay, there we have it. Now you can see that RAID 1 stops on the 14th and RAID 2 picks up on the 15th. Now, I didn't make any changes to any of the rental amounts or anything, so the amount that he owes should still be the same, $2,020. And remember that he was fully paid up, so once we reversed a bunch of those assessments, all the payments that were applied towards those assessments also had to be reversed. So all the payments that he made will be back in unallocated funds, and we'll have to allocate them again to the new assessments. So let's take care of that now. Okay, good sign. There's the $2,020. And for this, we'll just hit auto allocate. Now notice that it's all there, but all the payments are made as of 11/6. You can change that date if you want to. I'm just going to leave it as is. And now if we go into the payer statements and take a look, we should see 2 rental agreements now, but a whole lot of reversals, because remember, again, all of the assessments and all of the payments that had to be reversed. But if we take a look again in a rental agreement 2, where all of these new assessments and payments take place, we again come out with a balance of 0. So it's all paid up and it all matches up. So one other thing we can do here is just go back and have a quick look at the new repeating assessments for rent and pet rent, just to make sure that they're there and that they start on the right date and terminate at the end of the rental agreement. The other thing to notice is all the comments that Roller added. So if you need to go back and look and verify and try to figure out what's going on, these are of great value. And again, we only went back 3 weeks or so in time. If we backdated something 4 or 5 months, you could only imagine how difficult it would be to understand any of this without those comments. One final point here is, if you ever do need to go through this, please check the work. Roller will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, but there may be special cases that it doesn't catch. So my advice is that you manually check and correct anything that Roller didn't pick up for you automatically. Okay, I think that about does it for backdating rental agreements. As always, leave me questions or comments below, and I will do my best to accommodate.